Amid the cold winds of the Andes Plateau, on the shores of Lake Titicaca, at nearly 4,000 meters above sea level, there once existed a mysterious civilization where people turned a harsh land into a radiant center of the Andean world. This was Tiwanaku, a great stone city where colossal gateways still stand proud after more than a millennium, and where legend says the god Viracocha emerged from the lake to create humankind. From around the year 500 AD, Tiwanaku rose to become an empire controlling vast lands across Bolivia, Peru, and Chile. They built Akapana, a massive stepped pyramid, Kalasasaya, a ceremonial stone plaza, and most famously, the Gate of the Sun, whose enigmatic carvings still puzzle archaeologists today. For more than 5 centuries, Tiwanaku was not only a capital, but also the spiritual and political heart of the Andes. And yet, like all civilizations, Tiwanaku fell. Drought, famine, and conflict left the city abandoned. Still, their legacy endures. Stone blocks weighing tens of tons, fitted so tightly a blade cannot slip between them, mysterious divine statues, and the immortal legend of a people who once defied nature at a height nearly touching the sky. Come with me into the world of Tiwanaku, a civilization of stone, of myth, and of silence that has lasted for 1,000 years. At nearly 4,000 meters above sea level, where the deep blue sky seems close enough to touch, lies a land harsh yet full of mystery, the Altiplano plateau of the Andes. Here, cold winds blow day and night, winters are bitter, the rainy season damp and unforgiving, the soil barren, with few crops able to grow. And yet, this very place, where life should have been impossible, became the cradle of one of the most brilliant and enigmatic civilizations of ancient South America, Tiwanaku. At its spiritual heart lay Lake Titicaca, the world's highest large freshwater lake, vast as an inland sea, shimmering like a heavenly mirror in the heart of the Andes. In Andean mythology, Lake Titicaca was not merely a lake, but the source of the cosmos. They told that from its waters the creator god Viracocha emerged, bringing light to the world, shaping the sun, the moon, the stars, and finally mankind. Viracocha taught people how to farm, to build, to live in harmony with nature. From this legend, Lake Titicaca became sacred ground where life and myth intertwined. And when the first tribes settled its shores, they believed they dwelt at the very center of the world where the gods had once walked. Around 500 AD, among the communities along the lake, one people gradually rose above the rest. They built larger villages, formed tighter social organization, and most importantly, learned to turn the harsh land into abundance. These were the ancestors of the Tiwanaku. Their heart lay on the lake's southern shore, where the legendary stone city of the same name would later rise. What set the Tiwanaku apart from the beginning was their ability to adapt to nature. The Altiplano was cold, its soil poor, and winter frosts killed crops. Yet the Tiwanaku invented raised fields called sucacolas. They dug long canals in parallel lines, piling soil into high ridges. Water in the canals irrigated crops and retained heat overnight, protecting against frost. Farming, impossible at such heights, became abundant. Barley, potatoes, and quinoa, along with llama and alpaca herding, sustained thousands, then tens of thousands of people. This innovation formed the foundation for Tiwanaku's rise from a small community into an empire. But Tiwanaku's origins lay not only in soil and water, but also in faith and divine symbols. From the earliest days, they built small stone shrines facing the sunrise, where they believed Viracocha gave life. They carved images of gods onto stone slabs, representing the sun, lightning, rain, and Mother Earth Pachamama. Agricultural rites and modest sacrifices were held not only to ask for harvests, but to bind the community together. In such a harsh land, shared belief was the strength that ensured survival. Over time, the Tiwanaku Center began to take shape. From a lakeside village, it grew into a complex of plazas, temples, and stone dwellings. The first stone slabs were raised, simple yet enduring, heralding a tradition of stonework that would reach astonishing heights. The Tiwanaku believed stone was eternal, a symbol of immortality, and from stone they built their world. Remarkably, Tiwanaku's formation was not sudden, but gradual, over centuries. Between about 500 and 800, it steadily grew into a religious and political hub, drawing in neighboring communities. Shared rituals and festivals around Lake Titicaca bound scattered tribes into a larger unity. This integration created the social foundation strong enough to launch a golden age. The origins of Tiwanaku are a story of creativity under hardship. They had no fertile floodplains like Egypt by the Nile, no lush forests like the Maya, no mighty rivers like Mesopotamia. All they had were cold winds, barren soil, and a deep blue lake. Yet they turned it into life through ingenuity, faith, and communal strength. And when the sun rose over Lake Titicaca, its light shining upon the raised fields and the first stone temples, the people of Tiwanaku knew they had done the impossible. They had transformed a land nearly touching the heavens into the birthplace of a civilization. From there, Tiwanaku rose to become one of the Andes' brightest centers, where myth and reality fused, leaving a legacy that still amazes humanity 1,000 years later. When entering its golden age, Tiwanaku was no longer just a village by Lake Titicaca. It had become a massive stone city, a religious, political, and economic center whose influence stretched across the Andean highlands. Between the 8th and 10th centuries, Tiwanaku flourished, rising to dominate the entire region, controlling not only the lands around Lake Titicaca, but extending into Bolivia, Peru, Chile, and even northern Argentina. From a lakeside community, Tiwanaku had transformed itself into a true empire, with its heart in a mysterious stone city where, even today, standing among its ruins, one can still feel a supernatural power radiating from every stone. The most striking feature of this era was its architecture. At the center of Tiwanaku, colossal stone structures were built, designed with astonishing precision. Most prominent was Akapana, a massive stepped pyramid nearly 17 meters high and more than 200 meters on each side. Though today it stands in ruins, one can still imagine its grandeur, with stairways rising to the top where temples and ceremonial plazas once stood. Akapana was not only a religious monument, but a symbol of Tiwanaku's power, a man-made sacred mountain linking humans with the cosmos. Nearby lay Kalasasaya, a vast ceremonial plaza enclosed by towering stone walls. It was here that astronomical rituals took place, where the Tiwanaku people observed the rising and setting of the sun to fix their agricultural calendar. Along its walls stand carved stone pillars and towering monolithic statues shaped like humans, but bearing divine presence. And at its center, one of Tiwanaku's most famous monuments still endures today, the Gate of the Sun. Carved from a single block weighing more than 10 tons, 3 meters high, and nearly 4 meters wide. The Gate of the Sun is etched with the figure of a central deity, often identified as Viracocha, the creator god. Surrounding him are 48 smaller figures, part human, part bird, perhaps messengers or symbols of natural forces. Scholars believe these carvings may encode a complex system of calendars and astronomy, allowing Tiwanaku to regulate harvests and rituals. To this day, archaeologists have not fully deciphered its meaning, and this mystery has made the Gate of the Sun one of the great symbols of ancient South America, standing alongside the Nazca Lines and Machu Picchu. Beyond Akapana and Kalasasaya, Tiwanaku also held Pumapunku, a site that continues to astonish the world. Here, stone blocks weighing tens or even hundreds of tons were cut with sharp angles and fitted so precisely that not even a blade could slip between them. Many blocks are shaped like the letter H, with intricate interlocking grooves, resembling a kind of giant stone Lego. To this day, the techniques the Tiwanaku used to transport and fit these stones remain a mystery. Without wheels, without steel, using only stone and bronze tools, they accomplished feats that later civilizations still cannot fully explain. Tiwanaku's golden age was defined not only by its monuments, but also by its economy and trade. Thanks to their raised field suca-colis system, their agriculture yielded enormous surpluses, enough to feed tens of thousands in the city and export to other regions. They mined salt, copper, and tin, and traded with llamas, the Andean camelids that served as transport animals, while also providing wool, meat, and hides. Through this, Tiwanaku controlled a vast network of trade routes linking the Altiplano with the Atacama Desert, the Pacific coast, and even the Amazon rainforest. Archaeological finds reveal artifacts from faraway lands, seashells from the Pacific, brilliant feathers from the Amazon, precious stones from distant regions. This proves Tiwanaku was not just an agricultural empire, but a regional hub of exchange connecting diverse Andean worlds. That trade network was the backbone of its power, for the surrounding territories depended on Tiwanaku for goods and technology. Tiwanaku society in this era functioned as a theocracy. Leaders were both political rulers and high priests, governing as representatives of the gods. Vast plazas like Kalasasaya were not only ritual grounds, but gathering places for the people, reinforcing the belief that the gods were physically present among them. Colossal monolithic statues like the Ponce monolith or the Bennett monolith, standing over 7 meters tall, were raised as embodiments of divine beings, reminding everyone that power lay not only in human hands, but also in the cosmos. This fusion of religion and politics created a unique strength, making Tiwanaku both a capital and a holy city. At its height, Tiwanaku was not only a place of temples, but also a vast urban settlement. Studies suggest its population reached 40,000 to 70,000 people, an enormous number for such a harsh highland environment. To sustain this population, agriculture had to be highly productive and social organization tightly structured. People lived in adobe houses clustered around small plazas, forming community neighborhoods. There, they made pottery, wove textiles, worked copper, and participated in religious festivals. Daily life was inseparable from sacred belief, tied to the rhythm of the seasons and the authority of the gods. By the 10th century, Tiwanaku reached its zenith. Its territory and influence covered hundreds of thousands of square kilometers, radiating outward from Lake Titicaca across the Altiplano and into distant regions. Its power did not rely on massive armies, but on a blend of economy, religion, and cultural influence. Dependent regions looked to Tiwanaku as a sacred center, sending tribute, joining ceremonies, and in doing so becoming part of the empire. It was a soft form of empire, not conquest by sword, but by faith and prosperity. Yet this very brilliance made Tiwanaku vulnerable. A vast system demanded constant maintenance. A crowded capital required steady supplies, and a far-reaching trade network depended on political stability. When all worked smoothly, Tiwanaku shone like a star. But when one link broke, the entire machine could collapse. And though in the Golden Age no one imagined such a fate, the seeds of decline were already being sown in its greatness. But that was the story of centuries to come. For now, under the highland sun, the stones of Akapana, Kalasasaya, and Pumapunku still stood proud. The gate of the sun still opened like a portal to the cosmos, and Tiwanaku still reigned as the heart of the Andes. This was the age when the Tiwanaku believed they lived beneath the gaze of Viracocha, and every step on their stone plazas echoed with the voice of myth. If the massive stones of Akapana, Kalasasaya, or Pumapunku were the body of Tiwanaku, then its society, religion, and daily life were the soul that breathed life into this civilization. Without a tightly organized social system, without a strong enough religious faith, without the tireless hands of labor, there would never have been a Tiwanaku as powerful as it was in the 9th and 10th centuries. By looking at how the Tiwanaku people lived, believed, and worked, we understand why they were able to transform a cold highland into the radiant heart of the Andes. Tiwanaku society was organized as a theocracy where political and religious power were one. At the top stood the ruling elite, perhaps a king, perhaps a council of nobles, but all claimed to be empowered by Viracocha and the other gods. They ruled not only with power, but with faith. In the eyes of the people, they were the bridge between humans and the divine. The ones who could ensure that the sun would rise, the rains would fall, and the harvests would be plentiful. Obedience to the rulers was therefore not just a duty, but also a sacred act. Just below them were the priests and shamans, who commanded ritual and knowledge. They organized sacrifices, interpreted the symbols carved on the gate of the sun, tracked the sun and moon to set the agricultural calendar. They also played key roles in architecture and art, since every monument carried sacred meaning and reflected Tiwanaku's worldview. One could say that the priests were the spiritual brain of society, while the nobles were its political hand. Together, these two classes reinforced absolute power. Below them were artisans and traders, the creators of fine goods and the connectors linking Tiwanaku to distant regions. Tiwanaku pottery was famous for its geometric patterns and stylized human and animal figures. Surviving fragments show their artisans had refined techniques and enduring colors. The great monolith statues, intricate stone carvings, and perfectly cut blocks of Pumapunku all testify to their mastery. Meanwhile, traders carried goods far afield. Alpaca wool, maize, quinoa, potatoes traded for seashells from the coast, feathers from the Amazon, copper from Chile. Thanks to them, Tiwanaku was not only an agricultural hub, but also a commercial crossroads. The majority of Tiwanaku's people were farmers, the backbone of society. They cultivated the raised suca-caulis fields, tended llamas and alpacas, and supplied food and raw materials for the entire empire. By day, they plowed and irrigated. By night, they joined community rituals. Farmers were not only laborers, but also believers, convinced that their sweat was accepted by Pachamama, Mother Earth, who rewarded them with harvests. This faith made them willing to work tirelessly, building monumental structures not only for rulers, but as offerings to the gods. Looking deeper into Tiwanaku religion, we see a complex belief system blending local traditions with a shared Andean cosmology. At the center was Viracocha, the creator god, often depicted on the gate of the sun with a solemn face, holding staffs surrounded by 48 smaller divine figures. He was said to have stepped out of Lake Titicaca, shaping the heavens and the earth, giving humans light and knowledge. Alongside Viracocha were Inti, the sun god, Pachamama, Mother Earth. The gods of thunder and rain, all part of a faith rooted in agriculture and the cycles of nature. Tiwanaku rituals were tied to astronomy and the seasons. People gathered at Kalasasaya to watch the sunrise during solstices, marking planting and harvest times. They sacrificed animals, often llamas, and sometimes humans, to plead for rain and protection of crops. These ceremonies were not only religious, but social events, where the whole community participated, reinforcing bonds between people and the divine. Everyday life reflected this harmony of labor and faith. Pottery and murals show scenes of farmers harvesting, herding llamas, women weaving, artisans shaping clay. They wore alpaca wool tunics, feathered headdresses, and jewelry of stone and copper. Their main foods were potatoes, quinoa, maize, and llama meat. During festivals, they drank chicha, the traditional maize beer, danced and sang by firelight, believing such joy was a way of speaking to the gods. Though Tiwanaku society was strictly theocratic, it was clearly stratified. Nobles and priests lived in special districts near temples and central plazas. They controlled labor, distributed food, and led rituals. Commoners lived on the outskirts, farming and crafting. Slaves and captives, taken in conflicts, likely formed the lowest class, working on construction or heavy labor. Yet all classes, from the highest to the lowest, were bound by a shared faith in the gods and the greatness of Tiwanaku. What stands out most in Tiwanaku life was its communal spirit. People did not live in isolation, but in village groups, sharing work and goods. When a monument was built, the entire community took part, for it was sacred labor. When a festival was held, the entire community danced, for it was shared joy. This unity created the collective strength that allowed them to build achievements far beyond the reach of any single individual. Altogether, Tiwanaku functioned like a great machine, where each person was a cog. Nobles and priests held power, artisans and traders created and connected, farmers provided the economic base, slaves added their toil, all revolved around faith in the gods, embodied in stone monuments and communal rituals. And it was this structure that gave Tiwanaku its enduring strength across centuries. Yet the very structure also carried fragility. When faith faltered, when harvests failed, when rulers lost their sacred aura, society could no longer hold together. And a civilization built on communal unity and divine faith, once those bonds dissolved, faced an irreparable crisis. But during the Golden Age, if we imagine a festival at Kalasasaya, with thousands gathered under the sun, chicha flowing, dances resounding, prayers rising to Viracocha, we see a society vibrant, strong, and full of faith. And it was precisely this faith that turned the harsh highlands into a cradle of creation, leaving humanity a legacy of stone that time cannot erase. No civilization is eternal. Even though it was built in stone, even though it carried divine faith within it, Tiwanaku could not escape the law of rise and fall. After centuries of brilliance, from the 11th century onward, darkness began to cover the Altiplano highlands. The city that had once been the religious, political, and economic center of the Andes gradually lost its vitality until only silent stones remained, standing amid the cold winds and mists of Lake Titicaca. The first and most important cause of Tiwanaku's decline was climate change. Modern scientific research shows that around 1100, the Altiplano region experienced a prolonged drought, sometimes lasting for decades. Lake Titicaca dropped in water level, rivers dried up, and the sucacolas, the raised field system that was the foundation of agriculture, ceased to function. When there was no water to retain warmth at night, the cold winter killed crops. The fields that once overflowed with quinoa, potatoes, and maize now lay cracked and barren. An economy built on agricultural surplus suddenly collapsed. As agriculture weakened, the entire social machinery of Tiwanaku began to fracture. The city's population, once numbering in the tens of thousands, now faced famine. Communities abandoned the central region, migrating elsewhere in search of sustenance. The residential areas around Akapana and Kalasasaya grew deserted, leaving only empty stone walls. The city no longer echoed with festivals, but only with the howling wind through its stone gates. Meanwhile, the sacred aura of the theocratic rulers faded. For centuries, Tiwanaku's priests and nobles had ruled with the belief that they could summon rain, ensure harvests, and maintain cosmic balance. But when drought dragged on, when the skies withheld rain, when crops failed, that faith was shaken. The people began to doubt. Were the gods still listening? Did the priests still hold power? This collapse of spiritual authority was the fatal blow. For Tiwanaku's society had always functioned on divine faith. When the gods fell silent, the ruler's power dissolved. Weakness at the center opened the way for dependent regions to break away. At its height, Tiwanaku had controlled a vast network through economic and religious influence, not through a massive standing army. Distant areas like southern Peru, northern Chile, and northern Argentina had once looked to Tiwanaku as a sacred center. But when that center lost strength, these regions asserted independence, refusing tribute. Trade networks disintegrated, depriving Tiwanaku of luxury goods and stripping it of political control. At the same time, rising competition from new groups in the Andes hastened its collapse. In northern Peru, the Wari civilization also weakened, but smaller communities arose to fill the power vacuum. In the south, new populations emerged in the Atacama Desert. Because Tiwanaku never had a large centralized army, it could not defend its empire-wide network when attacked from many directions. Internal conflict and division flared as well. With failed harvests and fruitless sacrifices, communities blamed one another and even rose against the elite. Archaeological evidence shows some areas abandoned abruptly and some monuments left unfinished. These are signs that Tiwanaku unraveled not in a single great battle, but through gradual internal decay over decades. By around 1100, Tiwanaku was abandoned. The once busy streets were empty. The Kalasasaya Plaza no longer gathered crowds to watch the sunrise. Akapana remained only as a pyramid eroded by wind and rain. The Gate of the Sun still stood, but no one remained to explain its mysterious carvings. Tiwanaku, once the radiant center of the Andes, had fallen into silence. The collapse of Tiwanaku was a quiet tragedy. There was no invading army, no decisive battle. It was like an oil lamp slowly running dry, its flame flickering and then going out. Harsh nature reclaimed what it had once given. The theocratic order lost its faith. Trade networks fell apart, and in the end, people were forced to abandon the stone walls they had labored to raise. Yet that silence also created an eternal mystery. When modern explorers and archaeologists came to Tiwanaku, they found a great stone city on a desolate highland. They asked, how could a people have built these monuments at nearly 4,000 meters in altitude without the wheel, without steel, without written records? And why did such a radiant civilization vanish almost without a trace? These questions have never been fully answered, and it is precisely this enigma that keeps Tiwanaku forever captivating to human imagination. Tiwanaku declined, but it did not die completely. The Andean peoples still remembered them, passing down stories of Viracocha of Lake Titicaca, of the gods who once emerged from its waters to create the world. And centuries later, when the Inca rose to become South America's greatest empire, they looked back to Tiwanaku, claiming it as part of their spiritual ancestry. Thus, even though the city lay in ruins, Tiwanaku lived on in memory, a shadow of the past illuminating the empires that followed. Although Tiwanaku declined around the 11th century, though the city was abandoned, its people dispersed, and its raised fields dried up. The legacy they left behind never disappeared. On the contrary, it was precisely the silence of the stones, the mystery of the yet unresolved monuments, that made Tiwanaku one of the most immortal civilizations in the imagination of humankind. And that legacy does not rest only in material ruins, but radiates through culture, religion, memory, and even the empires that followed. First, the most obvious and tangible legacy is the immortal stone monuments. To this day, on the vast Altiplano plateau, the Gate of the Sun still stands tall, carved with the image of a central deity whose eyes gaze into the distance, holding scepters in both hands, surrounded by 48 enigmatic figures. Archaeologists believe it represents a kind of calendar or astronomical system, yet no one has fully deciphered it. That very mystery makes the Gate of the Sun an eternal symbol, a place where one feels confronted with knowledge that transcends time. Alongside it, the stones of Pumapunku, with a precision so great that even modern engineering marvels at them, stand as proof of Tiwanaku's extraordinary building skills. The H-shaped blocks, the grooves joined with millimeter perfection, pose the question: how could a society without the wheel, without steel, have achieved this? That very question has turned Tiwanaku into a land of legend, where some even believe they may have been aided by supernatural forces. But Tiwanaku's legacy is not only in monuments, but in the religious and cultural ideas they passed on throughout the Andes. Viracocha, Pachamama, Mother Earth, Inti, the sun. These deities did not vanish with Tiwanaku. Instead, they lived on in Andean culture, especially inherited by the Inca. Centuries later, the Inca Empire revered Lake Titicaca as their place of origin, and Viracocha as the supreme creator god. This continuity made Tiwanaku a bridge between generations of Andean civilizations, a spiritual root upon which the Inca built their great empire. The raised field agricultural system was also a precious inheritance. Though abandoned when Tiwanaku declined, traces of thousands of hectares of raised fields remain etched into the highlands. In the 20th century, scientists attempted to reconstruct this system and discovered it could multiply yields several times over conventional farming and even resist frost. This proves that the Tiwanaku were not only master builders, but also brilliant agricultural engineers, leaving behind a technology still valuable 1,000 years later. In art, Tiwanaku pottery, monoliths, and stone carvings carry profound symbolism. Geometric motifs, stylized human faces, images of birds, fish, llamas, all reflected their worldview. These works were not only beautiful, but conveyed philosophy, that humans are part of the cosmos, bound to nature and the gods. Today, many Tiwanaku motifs are still used in Andean folk art, demonstrating the enduring vitality of their aesthetic legacy. Tiwanaku also left a historical lesson about the fragility of civilization. Despite high technology, grand architecture, and vast trade networks, they could not escape climate disaster and social imbalance. This stands as a warning for modern humanity. Every civilization depends on nature. When the environment changes, when water runs dry, no empire is invincible. The fall of Tiwanaku, like that of the Maya or the Khmer, is proof that humankind must respect nature if it wishes to endure. Today, Tiwanaku's heritage has been recognized worldwide. In 2000, UNESCO listed Tiwanaku as a World Heritage Site for its unique cultural, historical, and architectural value. Visitors from around the globe come to Bolivia to see the Gate of the Sun, Pumapunku, Akapana. They walk among the ruins, hear the wind passing through the stones, and feel a sacred silence. Within that silence are echoes of the past, unanswered questions, and the sense that one stands in a space belonging not only to humans, but also to the gods. For the people of Bolivia and the Andean communities, Tiwanaku is not only the past, but part of their identity. Traditional festivals are still held around Lake Titicaca, where Viracocha and ancient gods are remembered. Artisans still weave motifs recalling Tiwanaku symbols. Folk dances still carry rhythms from thousands of years ago. Tiwanaku is no longer a city, but the collective soul of an entire land. And beyond, Tiwanaku has become a global legend. It is mentioned among stories of lost civilizations, standing alongside Atlantis, the Maya, and Angkor. It sparks curiosity, awe, and inspiration. For when people gaze upon those massive stones, they realize that they are not the first generation to dream of conquering nature and building immortal wonders. Tiwanaku once did it, and even though they fell, they left behind an eternal proof that humankind, even in the harshest places, can reach for dreams that touch the sky. Tiwanaku collapsed, but its legacy is immortal, in stone, in earth, in culture, in memory. And when we stand before the Gate of the Sun, gazing at the carvings of Viracocha against the deep blue Andean sky, we do not see only an ancient ruin, but a civilization still alive. Alive in imagination, alive in belief, alive in legend. And perhaps that is the true immortality the people of Tiwanaku left for humanity.